Hello everybody, welcome back. This is Angry Jay here, and I'm back today with yet another team breakdown in NHL 94 Sega Genesis version. Today I start my last team in the Patrick Division, the Florida Panthers. And I've been talking about the Patrick Division and how some teams can be kind of forgotten in the grand scheme of things like the Capitals and the Islanders and the Devils. But I literally forgot Florida when drawing up my scripts for this. I usually look at Hockey Reference, the 1992-93 season, when I prepare for these, just so I can grab a few extra interesting tidbits of information. And Florida didn't play until the 93-94 season, so this is kind of their expansion team roster here that we have. And when I'm looking at Hockey Reference, I just completely blanked that Florida was even in the game. But luckily, I managed to remember them just by pure luck, and I'm here to present you with their team breakdown today, so they will definitely not be forgotten, although they are one of the lesser teams in the game due to their being an expansion team. But usually I have a record here saying what they did in 92-93, but I don't have one. In 93-94, they actually were a very competitive team, and they only missed the playoffs by 1 point in their first year. So that's pretty impressive, I think, because teams like San Jose, Ottawa, Tampa Bay, they all struggled mightily in their first years in Florida. And to a lesser extent, Anaheim. Anaheim was competitive, but they didn't get as close to the playoffs as Florida did. But this is an interesting turnaround from earlier in the decade for the expansion teams. So for Florida, in this game, they have a low home ice advantage, so you're not going to get too many bonuses when at home. But when you're on the road, it's going to be a lot worse. You're going to have what they call a brutal disadvantage. So there's low away ice disadvantage, average, high, and then brutal. So you're going to face substantial penalties, and you will notice a difference when you take a team like Florida on the road, especially if you try to go against a more established, tier 4, tier 5 team. It's going to be very noticeable, and it's going to be very difficult to get things going on either side of the ice. So Florida, they're a tier 6 team, but they could almost be considered tier 7. But I think they actually do pretty well within their tier. You can easily use them against Anaheim and Ottawa. I feel like they match up pretty good there. San Jose and Tampa Bay are a little bit more difficult within their tier, so I wouldn't be so quick to put Florida against them because they tend to have a little bit more speed or offense to counter Florida's defensive strategies. And I wouldn't really take them out of tier 6 if I could at all help it. I don't think they're really equipped for that type of that climb in the tier list in tournament play. So let's talk about some of the few strengths that Florida has. And one of the strengths that they have is that their defensive pairing is very complementary of each other. I mean, you have Murphy, who's a fast, skilled, heavyweight defenseman, more of a middleweight, but I mean he's fairly heavy. He's your number one defenseman, and then he's complemented nicely by a weight bug defenseman, Gord Hines. I think they just work really well together, especially in tier 6. They can be quite imposing. Also with Florida, you get the best expansion goalie. So you get John Vanbiesbrouck. He's easily the best goalie on any expansion roster in tier 6. So you have a real good advantage on defense from just the word go with Florida. The nice thing about Florida, a lot of their players have a high agility rating, especially in comparison to their speed. So they're going to have a quick first step. They're going to be easier to move in tight. You'll have some nice deke moves with them. It's just nice to have that little burst of speed, those first couple strides that you have with the player. And then lastly, Florida can match up a little bit. They don't have a lot of depth, but whatever depth they can use, it does vary widely from their starting lineup. So you have some room to play there. Some weaknesses, there's a lot of weaknesses on this team, but the main ones are you have the league worst speed at forward with this roster. There is only one player with 3 speed, and everybody else is 2 or below. And if you're unfamiliar with the 0 to 6 rating scale for attributes, just check below in the description of this video, and I'll detail out what all those ranges are. But just generally speaking, 0 is very low, 25, which is the bottom of the ratings, and then 6 is 99. So anywhere in between there, closer to 6 you are, the better it is, obviously. So moving on to these weaknesses, Florida is also a poor shooting team. They don't have a lot of shot power or accuracy, so you're going to have trouble scoring, and you're going to have trouble creating chances because you don't have very good speed. Also, the most useful players on this roster are weight neutral, so you can't really just blindly be physical with them. You have to know the matchups of every team to use Florida. You can't just use Florida blindly in a matchup in a tournament hoping to throw somebody off guard, and then a lot of your players, you just don't know how to use them physically because they're all weight neutral, so you just don't know what's going to work or not. So it can be kind of unreliable in that fashion. They do have very little depth. They literally have 1 to 2 options at each position, and those 1 to 2 options aren't that inspiring. But at least they're different from what's on the starting roster. And lastly, this team is just easy to neutralize in general. Scoring goals with this team takes a lot of work. It's probably the most offensively inept team in the game. So if your opponent really wants to focus on just shutting you down, in all likelihood you're going to get shut down. You just have to hope that your defense can shut them down just as well, and maybe you can scratch out a goal or two to make things work. So with all that said, let's go ahead and move into this lineup here. Let's start with the forwards. So you'll probably want to take Mellanby out right away. He's just kind of a non-starter with his skating. We'll get into that when I dig into the substitutes on this list. But we're going to stick in Mike Huff on the right and leave Lomakin and Skrudland in their default position. So Andrei Lomakin, he is your all-star player. He has 4 agility, 3 speed, so he's one of those players with a higher agility rating. And you'll definitely want to use that higher agility rating, especially if you're ever getting tight with Lomakin, because he can actually be a nifty little deker on, especially against these tier 6 expansion goalies who are just, they're very bad goalies. So if you get Lomakin in close, you can easily deke them out with his ability. His offensive awareness is only a 3. His defensive awareness is a 2, so he might not fill out those one-timer slots that you're hoping that he might, because he is your best shooter as well, with 3 shot power and 3 shot accuracy. This mostly just helps with his deking. He's not really a slap shot option, especially on the left wing, because he's a left-hander, so you're not going to get those big slap shot opportunities. If you really want those, you could just throw him to the right. He'll be fine there, or you can put him in the middle. Lomakin should just go wherever you feel most comfortable with him. I tend to like to put him on the left wing because he's my best player. He's got 4 passing. He's got 3 stick handling. So at stick handling, it's a little bit tough to just fly through the middle with him, and he's not necessarily fast enough to be doing that. So I think he's just more effective out on the wing to throw passes and just dangle and try to expose the defense from the wing. At 196 pounds, he's a pure middleweight. So within this tier, there's not a lot of guys that can weight bug check him. He just needs to watch out for anybody that can CB check. If your opponent doesn't know how to CB check, and that means a heavier player can check a lighter player with the puck, because generally there's a weight bug in the Genesis version where lighter players can actually check heavier players more frequently, and the heavier players cannot return that favor. So if your opponent does not know how to CB check, Lomakin actually receives a nice little boost for you. He is definitely your best offensive player. He should be carrying the puck as much as humanly possible, and he's just your kickstarter and really your entire offense. Without him going, Florida really struggles, and you'll start to see why pretty quickly. Moving on to the center position, we have Brian Skrudland. He has 4 agility, 2 speed. He has 2 offensive awareness, but 4 defensive awareness, so he's going to have a real tough time filling out those one-timer areas. But you don't really have a lot of other options, and he's one of your better skaters, especially with the 4 agility. So if he gets in close, he's another guy that can deke those expansion goalies pretty easily, and with 2 shot power and 3 shot accuracy, trust me, he's one of your better shooters. So you definitely want to keep him in the middle, I think, because he's pretty useless out on the wing. With 3 passing, 3 stick handling, you don't really lose much there in terms of center ability with Brian Skrudland compared to Lomakin. 204 pounds, he's just a little bit heavier, but he does have 4 checking, so he can actually be a pretty good weapon with the CB check. I know the 2 speed's kind of rough, but at least you have 4 agility, and he's decent weight, and he can really abuse guys on San Jose, Anaheim, Tampa Bay, not Anaheim, Ottawa. Against Anaheim, you're just going to weight bug check those defensemen usually. So Brian Skrudland, good defensive center. He can really lock it down, and he's one of your better offensive players, although he's not really dependable in any sort of way. And then lastly, you have Mike Huff out on the right wing. He has 3 agility, 2 speed, 3 offensive awareness, and 3 defensive awareness, so he's nice and balanced there. He's actually got a decent shot with 3 shot power, but the accuracy is pretty poor at 2. He's got 3 passing, 3 stick handling. He's your best and most balanced player out of what's left on this roster, and there's only 9 forwards, so you don't have a lot of options. 196 pounds, so it's the same thing as Lomakin. He shouldn't be getting abused physically out there. He's just really slow, and he doesn't have any one skill that's just amazing, so he can't really, carry your team to any sort of serious offensive excursions. But he's just a nice balanced player. He should be plenty useful out there, and he's going to do a lot better than whatever else is on the bench. So I think this is your most balanced line. If you just love to have Lomakin in the middle, there's nothing wrong with putting Lomakin in the middle and putting Huff on the left and then Skrudland on the right. I think this is your best bet if you're going to put Lomakin in the middle. You can actually use Skrudland slap shot a little bit, and Huff you can use to deke. You could also flip Skrudland and Huff if you want to. I mean, it's not that big of a difference. But if you have to have Lomakin in the middle, this is kind of what I would consider. And then if you just cannot stand Mike Huff, and you want to go weight bug, Jesse Belanger is your best weight bug option. But he's really modestly skilled, to put it nicely. He's got 1 agility, 2 speed, 3 offensive awareness, only 2 on defensive, 2 shot power, 2 accuracy, 2 passing, 2 stick handling. So his skills just are not helpful. But he is 172 pounds, so he's very light. He's as light as Jeremy Roenick, and we all know Jeremy Roenick is just a devastating weight bug checker. Belanger's skating will definitely limit his ability, but within tier 6 it might not be that bad. He might be able to keep up, especially if he has some boost to his ratings. If you take him out on the road and try and get him going, it might be a futile experiment. But he is your best weight bug option, and one of the few guys you can bring off the bench. The only other guy that's really can be considered is Mellenby, but 1 agility, 1 speed, that pretty much just crushes him right there. He's just too slow. Even with 3 offensive awareness, 3 shot power, 3 accuracy, I mean, he's tied for your best shooter. But only 2 passing, 2 stick handling. He's a center only option, and it's tough to get a 1 agility, 1 speed center going. It just takes forever for him to get up the ice. 212 pounds. His skating is going to be really bad. I mean, he's not even lightweight to help make up for his terrible skate ratings. He does have 4 checking, but again, his skating is going to really limit his CV checking ability. But then after him, everybody else is pretty much the same. Tom Fitzgerald, Dave Lowry, Bill Lindsay, Randy Gilhan. They're all more or less the same player, and they're not impressive. They have a bunch of 2 ratings everywhere. They maybe have a 3 in awareness, and that's about it. I mean, a lot of these guys, funny enough, Fitzgerald, Mellenby, Skrudland, Lowry, Bill Lindsay, Jesse Belanger, they were on Florida's 96 Stanley Cup finalist team. So these guys actually became really good NHLers. They contributed to a legitimate Stanley Cup contender, although they did get swept by the Avalanche 4-0. But I mean, they beat the Pittsburgh Penguins with Meyer Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr that year to get to the Stanley Cup final. So, these guys are really unimpressive now, but in a couple years, they actually did become very nice NHL players. Some of them already were, like Brian Skrudland and Mike Huff. But kind of an interesting tidbit there that you look at this roster, you're just really unimpressed by all these forwards, but they actually all became part of a just really good defensive unit. This team always had a great defense in their early years. Who am I looking for here? Huff. Okay. And then let's look at the actual defense. There's only 6 options here, so you only have 1 great option. It's Gord Murphy. Gord Murphy, he's got 5 agility, 4 speed, so that's elite skating for a defenseman. His awareness is the only thing that's poor about him. He has 2 offensive awareness, 3 defensive awareness, but at least his defensive awareness is higher than his offensive awareness, so he shouldn't be going too crazy out there, getting lost on offense. He does have 4 shot power, so he's your hardest shooter on the team. He's got 1 accuracy, 3 passing, and 3 stick handling. 204 pounds, 4 checking. He's a CB checking force, especially against some of these slower tier 6 forwards. I mean, he's just a legitimate tier 2, tier 3 type of defenseman in tier 6. It's just crazy how out of place he is here, and you need him. He is definitely your best player by far. You need to get him going on offense because he's your best skater. He shoots the hardest out of everybody on your team. I don't care about the accuracy. I don't care that it's low. You need to get Gord Murphy involved. he's your quick start offense if you were to ever have quick start offense with the Florida Panthers. And then he's fantastic on defense. You could use him a la Bobby Orr in this tier. You can just take him up the ice, put a shot on net, and, so what if it misses or it gets blocked or whatever? You're fast enough with Gord Murphy to get back in the play on defense and just be there to shut the other team down. And if for whatever reason you're not there, Gord Hines is going to be your lightweight defenseman that complements Gord Murphy. He's got 2 agility, 2 speed, 2 offensive awareness, 2 defensive awareness, 1 shot power, 2 accuracy, 3 passing. 2 passing and 2 stick handling. So again, he's pretty much Jesse Belanger, just a little bit more agile. But at 172 pounds, he's just as light as Don Sweeney, who is the lightest defenseman in the game. So Gord Hines ties him for that. And in this tier, 2 speed, 2 agility, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. He's going to be a very good defensive defenseman here. He's just going to lay people out. There's not many forwards on any of the tier 6 teams that can withstand a Gord Hines body check. So he's just the guy you want to park in front of your net. And if someone tries to come through the slot, you just use Gord Hines to wipe him out. And that's that simple. That's all he does. That's all you need him for. And I think he does a really good job of that in this tier. Obviously, one of these guys could get hurt or go into the box, so you'll have to reach into the bench at some point. And the first guy that you'll want to go to is Stephane Richer. This is not the Stephane Richer from the New Jersey Devils. This is a different Stephane Richer who plays defense. He only played about 35 games in his NHL career. He only played 1 for the Panthers after he was selected in the expansion draft. And so I have no idea why Stephane Richer is such a highly rated player in this game. But, we're not going to argue with it. We're going to take it. And he's got 2 agility, 3 speed, so that's okay. He's got 3 offensive awareness, 3 defensive awareness. He's got 3 shot power, 2 accuracy, 2 passing, and 3 stick handling. So he's actually got some skills for a lower rated defenseman. 212 pounds, 3 checker, so he's going to be a fine CB checking option. He should be pretty good at limiting guys from San Jose and Anaheim and even Ottawa to some extent. He's just a good CB checking defenseman in this tier, and there's nothing special about him, but he's not, crippling bad, as you'll see that these other defensemen will be. After Stephane Richer, you don't really have much. I mean, there's Joe Sorella, 3 agility, 3 speed, low awareness. He's got 3 shot power, 2 accuracy, 2 passing, and 2 stick handling. 220 pounds, but only a 2 checker, so he's going to be a decent CB checker, but at that weight, his skating kind of feels a little slow. So I would probably prefer Richer and definitely Hines over Sorella. And then Tichy and Godiniuk. At least Godiniuk has 3 speed, but other than that, these guys are pretty useless. You should definitely avoid them at all costs. So Hines Murphy, that's pretty much the only pairing I recommend. But if you really want to have a CB checking guy, for whatever reason, Stephane Richer is perfectly fine, and even Joe Sorella to a lesser extent. So those are your 4 defensemen that you can use in your rotation. And then lastly, we look at the goalie situation here. John Vanbiesbrouck, fantastic goalie in tier 6, by far the best. He's got 3 agility, 3 puck control, 3 rating on his stick right, 4 on his left, and then a 3 glove right rating and 4 on his left. 180 pounds, he's going to be a decent manual goalie. The 3 agility kind of limits him, but at least he's light enough to feel pretty good in manual. And again, in this tier, there's not a lot of great shooters aside from Brian Bradley and Chris Kontos, and maybe Bob Kudelski. Aside from that, Vanbiesbrouck's going to shut the door on a lot of these guys pretty regularly in AI mode, so he's going to be very good. It's just once you take Florida out of the tier, they're going to give up way too many shots if you take him into tier 5. So he'll start to falter there, but that's not really because he's bad. It's just because you're giving up too many shots a game with Florida. So let's look at the team strategy here before I go into my matchup here with Anaheim. So with Florida, you definitely will just want to D up and turn this game into a slog with your opponent. You don't want them feeling comfortable out there. You don't want them trying to get these high-flying plays or giving up breakaways. The more you can just lock it down on D, like the real-life Florida Panthers did this time in their NHL history, the more successful you're going to be with Florida. On offense, you'll just want to work Andrei Lomakin as much as you can on the wings. He is your best forward by far, and he's your most creative forward, so just give him the puck, let him work, just pick and poke with the defense, try and find a weak link, and then put them in a situation where they have to make a decision between guarding you and maybe a one-time opportunity that you can just dish off to. That's really nice and easy to score on. Also, don't be afraid to use Gord Murphy on offense. As I've already touched on, he's your best player overall, best skater, hardest shot. He's just a really good player. So use him as a fourth forward if you can, because like I said, you can use him like Bobby Orr in this tier. With Florida, if you like manual goalie control, this might be the team for you in this tier, because Vanbiesbrouck is a perfectly fine manual goalie, and he should shut the door against a lot of these forwards. Even if against a skilled one-on-one type of player, you'll have the best goalie by far, and they're going to have a very limited player in all likelihood when trying to score on you. With Florida, just be patient. There's no reason to get into a rush. If you want to play a high-paced game with a tier 6 team, you probably picked the wrong tier to begin with, but you want to stay with San Jose or Tampa Bay in that case. Florida is just your grinded-out team. Make life miserable, just put the other player to sleep type of thing. And then lastly, don't let your forwards get run out of the building. I mean, when you look at Florida with one eye shut, you look at their defensemen, you look at their goal, and you go, okay, this team's actually pretty decent. They can play a little bit. And then you look at the forwards, and they're just the league worst by far. It's kind of startling how they can be competent at every other position, but once you look at their forwards and how bad it is, they're automatically a tier 6 team. So if you could just keep your forwards' heads above water, you're going to have a huge advantage with Florida in tier 6. But that's the battle. I mean, if it was that easy, they would be tier 4, tier 5 team. They wouldn't be tier 6. So you'll have to do whatever you can to make it happen. So let's go ahead and get this started here. We got Florida, Anaheim. This is the 1993 expansion battle. Both of these teams came into the NHL at this point, and like I said, they actually had pretty successful seasons, especially in comparison to their other expansion brethren at this time. Florida, they only finished 1 point out of the playoffs, and then in 94-95, they were very competitive again. They finished, I think, 5 or 6 points out of the playoffs that year, and then 95-96, that was the year they made the playoffs. They made their Cinderella run, very unexpected, to the Cup Finals. They eventually lost to the Avalanche 4-0, the former Quebec Nordiques. So if it was maybe a couple years earlier, the Quebec Nordiques would have been in their own conference. Maybe Florida doesn't even get to the Stanley Cup. Maybe they go play a different team in the Stanley Cup Finals and they win. So, it's kind of an interesting thing just in this time of the NHL's history, where teams were moving around, changing conferences. There's expansion teams out there, so it was just a time of a lot of change. A lot of players getting opportunity that might not have otherwise got a chance in the league. So I really think that this is a really interesting time in NHL history to be making a game, and we're very lucky to have a classic game such as this one represent this time frame in NHL history, because it was a high-flying era of hockey. A lot of guys had career years in 92, 93. I mean, a lot of that had to do with just beating up on expansion teams for 10 to 12 games, but still, they had to go out there and guys produced at a very high rate. It was just a much different type of hockey than we see a little bit later in the decade, where you got the Buffalo Sabres in 99 who just play defense all the way to the Cup Final and slow the game down, and it's a very different type of brand of hockey than they played 5-6 years earlier, when they had Pat LaFontaine and Dale Howardchuk and Alexander McGillney, and they're just flying up and down the ice and scoring goals left and right. Pat LaFontaine had his career year in 92-93. So I think we're lucky that we got a game this good based on a time in history that was so exciting for NHL hockey. So I'm not going to talk too much about this matchup. It's a tier 6 matchup. It's pretty ho-hum, I think. I mean, if you pick this matchup, you clearly just want to slow things down. You clearly want to play a brand of hockey that maybe you're playing against a higher skilled player, and you just want to make them feel uncomfortable by making them maybe use a team they're not familiar with, because I don't think a lot of people just sit around and train with the Florida Panthers. You don't make a habit out of that, really. They're kind of one of the if you're familiar with Tecmo Super Bowl, I would compare Florida to maybe New England. New England's clearly one of the bottom teams in that game. They have a couple of good options on defense, much like Florida, who have a couple of good options on defense, but their offense is just so terrible, just like New England's offense is so terrible. And most people don't pick New England matchups. It's kind of frowned upon, even by some people. If you pick Indianapolis, New England, that's just a terrible matchup. You pick Florida, Anaheim, you're picking essentially the Indianapolis, New England of Tecmo Super Bowl. So, I mean, if that's the way you want to play the game, that's perfectly fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. I mean, I actually kind of like using Florida and Anaheim for fun, just on the side, but it would be kind of a bummer to see this in a championship match, but, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I might pull this matchup out, depending on who I might be facing if I make it to the finals in a tournament, so it's just a good thing to be aware of, I think, especially even for an upper echelon player. Just, maybe someone tries to surprise you and you don't know anybody on this roster except Gord Murphy. Well, then you're kind of in a bad spot right there. So I think that's really just the breakdown of any time you use Florida. You just want to slow it down and make it a painful game for the other person to play. So just kind of talking about the Panthers a bit more and their place in history. This is the first time that obviously NHL hockey went down into Miami. It's been very controversial since day one, and still to this day. I mean, I've had some friends that it feels like who have liked hockey at some point throughout my life, and they all pretty much say the same thing. Why is there a team in Miami? They should just get them out of there and put them in in a cold place, or I just don't get it, So I kind of side with them. I mean, Miami just does not seem like a logical place to have a hockey team, but they actually got off to a really nice start in terms of expansion team success, and I think that built them a nice little fan base to make them successful when they could have been losing a lot of money. Because those early years, they can be very detrimental to a team's financial development. I mean, just a couple decades earlier, the Atlanta Flames tried to be successful in the South. It didn't work out. And then they went back actually again after that in the late 90s, 2000s with the Thrashers, and that didn't work out either. But a lot of these Southern teams have actually had pretty successful runs to the Cup, or their fan bases have become very solid, like Nashville and Tampa Bay. They have good fan bases. I mean, Dallas even. Not so much Phoenix, obviously. That's kind of another one that makes you scratch your head. But Vegas seems to be off to a great start, as much as I think they got way too much of a head start on compared to other expansion teams from 10, 20 years ago. But it's good to see that they have a very passionate fan base, it seems like, and they had a great Stanley Cup final run. And maybe the NHL knows something that we don't know. Maybe the Panthers, maybe you're not keeping them there for today. You're keeping them there for 10, 20 years down the line when the support becomes better, the revenue starts to turn around down there. They start turning profits, and they can contribute more to NHL history, and by winning a cup maybe, or getting some really nice players. So I wouldn't want to rule them out. I wouldn't want to just throw them into any old northern city. Obviously, it'd be nice if you could throw another team in Toronto, but I think it's going to be a really long time before we ever see that happen. But I don't want to just automatically hate on Florida just because they're in a Sun Belt state. I mean, my team, San Jose Sharks, it's not a traditional hockey market. I mean, they failed with their first team in the 70s, the Golden Seals, or the Seals, or they changed the name so many different times. It's in, 8 years that they were here? It's kind of silly. So you would hate to move a team out, and then down the line you try it again and then it works. I mean, you may as well just keep the team down there, build the market, and don't alienate the fans by moving a team out of there. And then maybe it'll work out one day. So as long as they're not just a huge crutch for the league to to prop up, I think having a team in Miami can be a good idea eventually. So hopefully this gameplay hasn't been putting you to sleep. I've been trying to play a more offensive type game with Florida in this matchup, but it's not really easy, especially when Gord Murphy is in the bench, or this means a penalty box, and then I have, got a bunch of backups out here. Here's Jesse Belanger. You can see he's pretty sluggish, and he's not very skilled with the puck, so I couldn't even get there for a legitimate opportunity, but there he goes. Weight bug checking, that's his calling card. That's what he can bring to the lineup if you do choose to use him. Here's Stephane Richer. He actually moves a lot better than Belanger, as I'm sure you noticed. And then, hey, they just connected for a nice little play. So, hey, maybe they got some fire wagon type of hockey here in Florida. But in all seriousness, Belanger is a very limited player. But in certain matchups, he can be okay. I mean, against Anaheim, he can actually be okay because he can just go weight bug check everybody on Anaheim. None of them can really deal with him physically. It's just, can he skate well enough to stay in the play? That's really the only question for Belanger. And he's one of those guys that he actually became a very good player for Florida for the first few years. He was one of their leading scorers. This was just before, he had a big year with anybody. And then they actually, have some guys that didn't really have much of a career after that, like Gord Hines and Stephane Richer. And, Randy Gilhan didn't last much longer in the NHL after that. So that's part history lesson, part NHL 94 lesson with the Florida Panthers. I really appreciate if you did manage to stay with this one for the whole episode. I mean, I know Florida's not the most awe-inspiring team in the game, but if you want to be a serious 94 player, it doesn't hurt to know what they're capable of, which it isn't much, but hey, they're on the game, so you got to be aware of them. So hopefully you enjoyed that video, and if you want to leave a comment, just ask a question or anything, feel free to do that down below. If you want to subscribe or give me a thumbs up, I appreciate those as well. Just appreciate all the support that I have been getting, and I'll continue to produce these videos for you guys, so hopefully you continue to enjoy them. Next up, I'll have the Chicago Blackhawks over in the Western Conference now, or the Campbell Conference, as they called it back in 1993. It wasn't the Western Conference just quite yet. So hopefully you'll join me for that one. All right, see you guys later. Bye.